Hey everyone, Michelle Abraham here from Amplify You. Super excited to be here with you today. We're going to talk about your idea to iTunes, getting your podcast set up the right way, the smart way, making sure that you're missing out on all those mistakes that some of us have made along the way. We're giving you the shortcut tools today to get your idea up and launched into a podcast in less than 30 days. So stick with us. This is going to be lots of fun. I can't wait to be here with you. All right, so podcasting the smart way. Super excited for this presentation. Podcasting the smart way. So you're in the perfect place at the right time right now. So the podcasting space has just gone from it's been around for a long time. Let's just put it that way. It's not a new space. People have been podcasting for 15, 20 years already. But it hasn't been a really kind of mainstream thing until the last couple of years. So you are in the perfect place, meaning that the podcast industry is in its infancy stages, but there's lots and lots of space. You may feel like everyone's podcasting and everyone's talking about podcasting, but in reality, only 6% of the whole world is listening to podcasts right now. So there's still lots of space in every category. There's lots of room out there for creativity, and there's lots of room for you, and your message is much needed out there. Podcasting is the perfect platform for you. Okay, so you may want to pay attention. So what's happening? So back in the day, if you wanted to boost your exposure, you had to do like blogging for, blogging every day for a month, or hoping for some traction. And then, you'd hear crickets usually, or buying radio or TV or print ads, rolling the dice on a funnel or Facebook ads, building an email list for years on end, hiring a PR firm and paying for a spot on a major television network, or writing a book. But there's a better way now. You can appear on a podcast show where you reach hundreds of thousands and even millions of people at a time, which is really cool. Or you can host your show and sign up from other coaches in your market. So, however, not many speakers or coaches know how to leverage this powerful medium and expand their reach, and some important reasons why podcasting will put them ahead of other competition as a speaker. So that's really what I want to drive home to you today, is that there's lots of room in the space. It's very exciting times, but it is the golden age of podcasting. We have not hit that critical mass yet. We're still on the growth space, and a lot of podcasts, a lot of coaches and authors and speakers and entrepreneurs and consultants and wellness professionals. That's who we work with at Amplify You. They really have a message that they're really passionate about. They want to make a bigger impact in the world. But their problem is they're the best kept secret. How many of you guys can relate to that? I bet a few of you. So the whole idea of podcasting is putting yourself out there to get your message out in a bigger, better way. So you're in the right company. My team and I have launched over 75 podcasts in the last 12 months. So I have a team of 4 podcast managers, and each manage many shows themselves, and myself. And we also have been doing this since 2012. So we started I started podcasting a meetup group in Vancouver in 2012 called YVR Podcasters. And we were out there meeting up every single month, talking about podcasting, talking about the industry. This is when I started getting into the podcasting space, and I've grown a team since then. We've been starting to do people's shows, here a few there over the last few years, but it wasn't until about 18 months ago now that really everyone started coming to us asking us to help them launch their podcast. Please, please, please. Like, we have this idea, we want to get a podcast up and going, but like the technology is and it's just not their thing. So luckily enough, it is our thing. So we really believe at Amplify You that your uniqueness is your genius, and also keeping you in your ingenious zone, which for authors, coaches, speakers, wellness professionals is usually in the content creation zone. So if we can keep you there, and then we can do the rest, that's how the magic happens in our business. So today we want to talk all about podcasting, like what is happening in the podcasting space right now. What is it all about? A little bit about my story. I won't spend too long on that, but it does relate to podcasting. And the 4 things that are stopping smart speakers, authors, coaches like you from podcasting. And we'll show you how to go from idea to iTunes in 5 steps, and I'll show you how to podcast the smart way. Hope that sounds good to all of you. All right, so let's just start at the basics. What the heck is podcasting? So it's interesting. Podcasting is using the internet to make a digital recording or broadcast available for downloading on a computer or mobile device. So it's kind of like the next step from blogging, so podcasting. So it's using your voice mostly. And it's interesting though, if you ask them, the younger generation, the millennials out there, they kind of don't really know the difference between a podcast. Like a podcasting is, it doesn't necessarily have to come from iTunes, and it's not necessarily an audio format. It could be a show that's, on YouTube, or it could be a show that's on. So podcasting kind of got this interesting name where it's not necessarily specifically on iTunes or one particular platform. You can find it on many different platforms in many different ways, whether it's your website or iTunes or Spotify or wherever you find podcasting. But essentially it comes down to, it is something that's a recording or a broadcast that you can download onto a device or computer. Now, what I hope for you is that you don't be this guy. So who is this guy? This guy is the guy where he's tried so hard to start a podcast. He's got the great ideas. He's a smart, intelligent person, and he just cannot get past the action steps to get a podcast launched. So he's getting overwhelmed with the technology and wanting to give up and just wanting to go crawl back into his shell and forget about podcasting altogether. I was in his spot at one point in my life, and I'm glad I crawled back out of my shell. So what are the opportunities for experts in the podcasting space? Okay, so there's really 3 different opportunities right now. And the most popular one is being a host. So that is having your own show. And that's probably what you were all thinking when we started this conversation is, that you have to have your own show. And that's probably why you're here listening to it. But I'm here to tell you that's a few other opportunities that are also available for you in the podcasting space. So yes, having your own show is amazing. You're in control of the creativity. You get to invite guests on. You get to be the expert. You also get to bring on other people. You get to build a community, build an audience. And hopefully for most of our clients, it's returning into their own business of products and services because they're the type of people they're entrepreneurs, coaches, authors, speakers, bringing them their tribe back into their own world so they can buy from them instead of putting ads and referring people to other places. So for our clients, mostly are entrepreneurs. And so it's their own products and services that we're looking at promoting through the podcast as a host. And, there's other kinds of shows out there, the audio dramas and the crime shows and the hobby shows and the gaming shows, and those make their money through, paid sponsorships or ads and things like that. And that's not necessarily what our clients do. Our clients are in the entrepreneurial kind of space. So that's the main one, is being a host. The second thing you can do is be a guest. And this is great, like when you have your own show as well. But even if you're just getting started, while you're getting your show up and running, you can go out and be a guest on other shows to kind of see what it's like. There's some interesting things. I have a whole workshop on how to be a great guest. So if this is something you're looking at doing, let me know. I can help you out with a workshop that will give you some good ideas. And so what's cool about being a guest is that you get to go out and be on someone else's show. You just show up, they interview you. And the cool thing is it lasts there forever, right? So your interview is going to be on their platform for as long as they leave it there. And that could be years. I have a friend, Scott Payton, who's, one of the original guys in the podcasting space, and he had a weight loss podcast out there, and it's been out there for like 20 years. And he says he still gets emails from people whose lives he's changed from his weight loss podcast, and that was like years and years and years and years ago. So you never know who's listening. And so being a guest is another great way for experts to go out there. And so why you want to be a guest is you want to go out there, and it's like networking, right? So instead of going to networking events now, you're going on to other podcasts. You're having a great conversation with someone. They're interviewing you. Their guests, their audience gets to know you, and you can offer their audience a free giveaway that leads them back to your lead magnet. So that's a great way of growing your business. And I would highly recommend being a guest, even if you're a host. And I would highly recommend being a host, even if you're a guest. I highly recommend doing both. Now, the third thing is not for everyone. The third thing is called being a podcast manager. And that's what we specialize in teaching. We specialize in podcast management for our clients. So we take care of the podcast once it's up and running, and we help you get it up and running too. But we really want you to focus on your genius area of content creation and working with clients, not editing podcasts and uploading it and syndicating it to programs and making social media graphics and things like that. We think your time is better spent where your genius lies, and that's in being the expert. So we've created a program where we help certify other people's podcast managers too. So if you find that you're in this space where you have a team already and you're thinking about podcasting, we can help certify your team to become podcast managers, or we take on lots of shows. We work with, I think, about 35, 40 shows right now on a monthly basis. So we love doing the podcast management. We feel like it's a huge service to people. And so that's something that some people who are maybe virtual assistants are really, that could be something that they can make money with doing in the podcasting space as well. So those, in a nutshell, are the three biggest opportunities in the podcasting space right now. So, do you want to be a host or do you want to be a guest? And the one on the right is supposed to be the guest. And that's our guest, Dan Janella, who came on my podcast and talked about, he talked about how to turn your podcast into a book, which is really cool. So these are the two we're going to talk about mostly today, being a host and being a guest. So a little bit about my podcast journey. It all started with this cute little guy. And so I had a fitness studio. I was a successful entrepreneur for many years before I got married and had kids. And when I became a mom, this little guy was around. I was used to being super busy, entrepreneur brain, fitness instructor, working with a huge team of people that I was responsible for. And all of a sudden I found myself at home by myself during the day with this little guy and going, my brain is really craving some like business information or some learning or something. As much as I love to goo and gaga all over the floor all day long, it was something that my brain was really craving. So I turned on the Apple TV and there was this little purple icon there. I was like, I wonder what this thing is. So I clicked on it and it was like the podcast app. And so I was like, podcast app, cool. I wonder what kind of shows there are. I wonder if there's any that, I would be interested in. And so I found these two shows that I loved. One of them is Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy. It was right near when she was just starting her show. And then another one I loved was Eventual Millionaire by Jamie Tardy. So anytime they had a new show coming out, after, of course, I binge watched and binge listened to all of their episodes. Every week I'd wait for Monday mornings when they released a new episode, and I put my earbuds in and I'd take my son in a stroller, take him for a walk and listen to the next episode of their podcast. And they were always really inspiring interviews with really successful people. So I found that really, actually, when I look back at it now, it probably pulled me out of a little bit of a postpartum depression kind of rut that I was starting to get into, where I'm really happy that I found something to be excited about and to keep my business brain going and to really motivate me to get out of the house and get walking. And we were listening soon later, we started listening to podcasts. I figured out you can listen to them in your car too. And so we were doing a little experiment with my oldest. He's 7 now, but we're going to go back and check back in with him in a few years and see if he ends up being an entrepreneur because of all the podcasts he had to listen to when he was a newborn baby. We'll see if that made any impact on him. So once I figured out you can listen to these podcasts from your Apple TV, from your car, I was like, this thing is not going anywhere. So I had this idea that I wanted to take my family on an RV trip. So my husband, we were looking at him quitting his job. We were going to move up to somewhere that we spend our time in the winter in his family's summer vacation home. This is where we're going to move from the city up here. And so we wanted to go RVing, but I didn't know anything about RVing. So I thought, hey, why don't I search out who the top 25 experts are in the RV space? So I did, and I successfully reached out to them, being a nobody, and I'd not even been in an RV before, really. Before we bought an RV and did this trip, we were going to be gone for about 5 months, all around Southern California and Arizona, and it ended up being a very cool trip. But in the process of before going on the trip, I wanted to learn about RVing. So I interviewed all these experts, and so I did the first few minutes of the interview, 15 minutes or so was going to be for a podcast, and then the last 30 minutes of the interview, they were teaching me something, and then we later released it as a virtual summit. So I was building my email list. We made sales from the recordings, and then I had a podcast. So that's how I initially launched my first podcast. once I finally figured out what I wanted to talk about, and that was RVing. So that was really cool. We had a podcast called Are We There Yet? My family went on our RV trip, had tons of fun, and now we have 3 shows. And so one of them, actually the one in the middle, Blissful Parenting, I'm a hired host for that show. So it's not my own show, but I'm a host of that show. And then we have Amplify You, where we interview other podcasters who are starting their shows, what their experience has been as a podcaster, plus other experts that can have something like we showed you Dan Janelle earlier, who can show you how to turn your podcast into a book. So other experts, we have a voice coach, Janine Graham, who teaches people who TEDx speaker how to speak. And so she's got some exercises for us. So we have those kind of interviews on the Amplify You podcast. So those are my 3 shows that I really love interviewing them. So we interview on Blissful Parenting. I get to interview parenting experts, which is helping me at home with my own parenting, which is super awesome. That's what I love about podcasting. So, so when we launched, here we are hanging out next to Mr. Tony Robbins on, this was a screenshot I took on my phone of the podcasting app. So it's really cool. Like, it's really an even playing field. You can launch a show and be right up there with all the other super cool people that are really well known. And I think that's pretty cool thing about podcasting. Also, it's a medium, right? So you can reach out to people who you might not be able to really have reached out to. You have something that they want, which is like time and attention and an audience. And so reaching out to people that maybe you thought were out of your reach, being, before having a podcast. Now with a podcast, you have an excuse to reach out to them and say, hey, love what you do, would love to interview you on my show. Oftentimes that turns into like a little conversation before the show, a little conversation after the show, some networking. Now you're friends. They've had experience as an interview together. You connect with each other on social media. You now have a new person in your network that you can refer people to. They can refer people to you. They maybe have other shows you can go on. You have other shows they can go on. You can promote their products. Like, it's just a really great opportunity to expand your network. So I see podcasting as like networking, and it's a really great way to network. So here we are. We went on the podcast. We went on the RV trip, and we've been on lots of family vacations since then, Maui and Mexico, and we just had a lot of fun, like traveling in our RV. And it's actually thanks to podcasting that I've got a lifestyle business where my husband quit his job, and now we homestead on this lake on the Sunshine Coast, where we have to take the boat over to our car, where my son then takes the bus to school. He's in grade 2, so my daughter will be joining him there next year in kindergarten. So it's pretty cool. Our kids take a boat to get to school. I think that's pretty awesome. And we live a lifestyle that we love, and that is thankful to podcasting. So you never know where podcasting might lead you. For us, it's been a pretty amazing journey. And we live completely off the grid too. So what kind of shows we work with? Here are some shows that we work with. As you can see, like, there are like totally all different kinds of shows, different kinds of people, some business, some spiritual, some parenting shows, just so many cool shows, just a few to give you an example. And I want to dive right into the 4 biggest things that stop smart, savvy people, experts, from ever having a podcast. So number 1, oops, wrong way. All right. So the number 1 thing is fear. Fear of, not fear of the aliens out there, but the fear of your voice being heard, sharing some vulnerable stories or situations, maybe. Fear of not necessarily like no one, like some people come and have a fear of like no one downloading their show, which that never happens. There's always people, your show is always going to be downloaded. There's enough people out there listening that you'll have downloads. But I think there's this fear of like putting yourself out there that comes with podcasting. So we conquer that by taking small little steps, getting closer and closer, just getting in action, just getting a movement really helps you conquer that fear of getting yourself out there. And really, if it's a really big fear, I would suggest going on the shows as a guest before you have your own show. If you feel more comfortable being interviewed by other people, That sometimes is helpful. Sometimes standing behind your computer alone, talking to no one, sometimes doesn't feel like the most like exciting or energetic thing to do. So that could be a little bit of a fear too, like standing, like, you feel like you're alone out there when you're recording. And so yeah, just getting in action really helps you conquer this fear. The second one is a huge one. So that on the top right, I have a picture of what people think you need. Like that's like tons of equipment and microphones and all this kind of stuff. Really, what you need is like one microphone. I use a Blue Yeti. It's like super easy. You turn it on and connect it to your USB to your computer. I use Zoom to record. I have a little HD camera. I have a screen, a windscreen that helps too. But like that's the basic like technology. Like all really you really need is a laptop or desktop, a computer, and Zoom, and you can record your podcasts no problem. So the technology, my mentor in podcasting space, James Martell, he's just passed away recent in the last few years, but he used to tell me how he used to have to like dial up internet to like hold the microphone to like the phone and then record on a cassette, and like, oh my gosh, it just sounded like such a nightmare compared to like what we have now. It's like so easy. So there really is no excuse when it comes to the technology. Just got to do it. And if the technology is really something that feels overwhelming, then you just let us know. We can take care of everything for you. So the third thing is perfectionism. Perfection is stagnation, and perfectionism really gets in the way of getting your show out there. The over analyzing it, and some people taking out like every and ah. We don't let our clients do that. We let our clients be authentic in their recording, and the more realistic you are, the better it is for your clients too, right? So you don't want to don't want to sound too polished because then you're not realistic or reachable, right? And so we have this saying in Amplify You: if you don't think your first few episodes suck, then you waited too long to get them out there, right? So if you're super happy with a super polished first few episodes, yeah, you should have launched it last year. So just get going. The conquering the perfectionism is just by letting go and making sure like it's 80% done, it's 80% there, and know that the more you interview, the more you speak into a microphone, the more you are out there, the just the easier it gets, the better you sound, and the more awesome your show is going to get. So just don't worry. Go back and listen to anyone's first few episodes on any show. I challenge you. They all suck, and they've all gotten 100 times better, right? So don't let that stop you. And the last thing is time. I think in our heads, when we think about podcasting, it seems like a huge project, huge undertaking that's going to take away from everything else you're doing. And it's like adding another thing to do on top of all the social media posting you have to do, and the blogging you have to do, and the videos you have to do, and all this stuff, right? So if you take a step back and be like, okay, hold on. What we challenge our clients to do is rewind. Okay, let's look at your whole content strategy. If we actually did your entire content strategy and recorded your episodes like in chunks, so you're gonna have 2 guest interviews a month, record those 2 together, record your 2 solo shows together, so you got 4 episodes for the month. You've spent maybe 3 hours doing that. You actually can then take your content, transcribe it, cut it into little bits of pieces, make little snippets of sound bites. You can make blog posts out of that. You can publish them as podcasts, as videos on YouTube. You can actually have huge amount of mileage from this content, and you have a foundation for all the social media posts you need for the month with just your few hours of time into a podcast. Now you can then like post randomly whenever you want, or when you're on the go, or Insta stories or whatever. But at least you have a foundation and a strategy for content for the month. So that's the way we like to look at podcasting, is not another thing I have to add to my to-do list. It's just like, let's do the podcasting as the main thing you do, and then get everything else from that content you've just created. That is podcasting the smart way. Okay, so I'm going to buzz you through a whole bunch of statistics, and bear with me. These are new statistics. I'm actually literally going to read them. They just came out at the end of this year. Edison is one of the places we get the statistics from. And so 700,000 active podcasts, which is up the last few years from 500,000. There's 29 million episodes out there, and there's 100 different languages of podcasts. The most popular genres obviously are business, society, culture, comedy, news and politics, and health. 70% of the population are familiar with the term podcasting. So that's like a 7 out of 10 people when you're walking down the road. Interesting, when I first started in 2012, I'd say it was probably 1 or 2 people out of 10 I spoke to who knew what the heck a podcast was. And I even had a really good friend of mine the other day came up to me and said, you've been talking about podcasting a long time. I didn't have a clue what you're talking about. But now I commute from Vancouver to Squamish, which is about a 45-minute drive. She's like, I listen to 3 podcasts a day. So now she's like, now I totally get what you're talking about. So, it's taken a while for some people to catch up, but now 7 out of 10, like 70% of people walking down the street is pretty awesome. 50% of the whole population have listened to a podcast. 32% of the US population has listened to a podcast at least every month. That's huge. 22% of the population listen to podcasts weekly, but 6% are avid podcast fans. So we have a lot of growth to do there. But that's cool. I would say like that's just statistics, sorry, is the weekly podcast one is pretty interesting. So a weekly podcast, that's 22% of the population. That's pretty huge. So it's grown a long way in the last few years, but it's still in the infancy stage. So what we know about podcast listeners is that they're loyal, they're affluent, and they're educated. When I first started looking into podcasting, the statistics were male CEO higher than 6-figure income was and the cool thing about podcast listeners, they all have a credit card. To have an iTunes account, you have to have a credit card. So that was an interesting thing about the listeners, is that they're a good demographic to have as customers, right? So podcast listeners, again, now it's changed a little bit more. You'll see in a little bit the statistics between male and female, but they're still loyal, affluent, and educated. And 80% listen to all or more of each podcast episode. This is probably the most important statement I'm going to say in this entire presentation. 80% listen to all or more of each episode. What? Okay, so if your podcast episode 20 to 30 minutes long, your average listener is listening to, let's just say it's 30 minutes long, they're listening to about 20 minutes of it. Holy crap, where else in this world, when time and attention are our currency, are you ever going to get someone to listen to you for 20 minutes? Definitely not on YouTube, definitely not on Instagram, definitely not on Facebook, definitely not on any other platform. So this is what makes podcasting super unique. And if that's not enough to make you want to say, yes, I need a podcast show, then I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to convince you. And the average person listens to about 7 different shows on a weekly basis. So those are for those avid podcast fans out there. Okay, so here's some more stats. 49% listening is done at home, 22% while driving, 11 while at work, 4 while riding public transportation, 4 while working out, 3 while walking around, and 7 in other situations. Interesting is that I thought for sure there'd be more people listening when riding public transportation, because I don't know what else you'd be doing when you're riding the bus. Podcasting, I think this is super interesting because those are the main things people are doing. So they're commuting, they're at the gym, they're walking their dog, they're cooking dinner, they're taking the baby for a walk, whatever it is that they're doing. But those are things that people have you have their whole attention. You're in their earbuds, which is in their ears, which is super intimate. And so I think this is a really, really, really important thing that you really need to keep that in mind when you are listening to people. Okay, so smartphones are the number 1 medium for podcast consumption. 54% Apple, 43% Android, and 0.3% the others. Who knows what they are? And again, I put this in again because 80% of the listeners listen to an entire podcast episode or most of an episode. And this has been this statistic for the last 3 years. It's been the same number. So that's not going away. It's not going down. It's not going up. It's pretty interesting. So podcast listeners are much more active on every other social media channel, so which is pretty cool. Podcast listeners are more likely to follow companies and brands on social media, which is great. So they're good, loyal listeners. Now, if I didn't already tip you over the edge of why you need to have a show, here is one that's going to tip you over the edge. Google announced, so Google's been a little bit late to the podcasting game, but they're on board now. We have Google Podcasts. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. Hopefully they're going to come up with some really cool analytics, because figuring out your podcast analytics is a little bit of a challenge, and then no one's really come up with an all-encompassing, because you're on so many different platforms. It's hard to get like the real picture of where your show is, except for if you just focus on Apple. So it's nice that Google's on board now. But what they announced in November, which is super cool, is that they're going to start indexing your podcast, which means they're going to put your podcast up. They're going to put your podcast up on the Google search, and people are going to say, type in, if say you talk about cars on your show, and you type in like BMW. If you talk about BMW on your show and you've put it in your show notes and publish the show notes, those are going to start populating up onto Google searches as a podcast episode, which is insane. So I've done a couple of like tests with this, and I've Googled a few different people that I know are really big in the podcasting space, and I've Googled some things, and their actual podcast episodes are showing up higher than their YouTube videos, higher than their website, higher than anything else. So this is just the first step from Google. So Google is going to do indexing your podcast now, which is awesome. Next step is going to index voice. It's going to do voice recognition, which is right now. But that's really cool. That's coming up soon. But you can say to your Google device at home, hey, Google, play such and such podcast. You can do that now too, which is really cool. So just more reasons that podcasts are amazing and they're not going anywhere. Okay, so I want to talk about Diane for a second. So she got her podcast in a print magazine on the inside cover. So she's got a magazine, and how she did that, she traded with somebody. Okay, so she traded with the magazine person. She came on as a guest. She printed her in the magazine. Pretty cool. That came from her podcast, right? Now her show's in front of a bunch of new eyeballs. Janice got her show. She interviewed the owner or the higher up of one of the network marketing companies. And in turn, after being on her show, he was so impressed, he invited her to speak on stage in front of 40,000 people in a national conference. Hello, huge speaking gig. That's pretty amazing as well. Robin had 150 people that entered her contest when she launched her show, and made her hit #1 for parenting podcasts in iTunes in 3 different countries on her launch week. So having a podcast creates expert positioning for your brand, okay? So it allows you to become more of an expert. So if I'm looking at this company over here, they have a nice website, nice packages, and I'm looking at this company over here, and they have this website, and they have this package, but they have this podcast, so then I can go and listen to them and hear what they're all about and get to know them. I'm going to go with company B, right? And that goes for you guys who are like speakers, authors, coaches, personal branding, right? So that's going to help your customer. You're going to take them on the journey with you, and they're going to want to buy from you because they like, know, and trust you. And you've earned that through your podcast. You haven't done anything. They've just listened to you. Podcasting allows you to do pull marketing. Okay, so you're not out there shouting on social media. People are coming to you. Okay, so podcasting allows you to impact millions of lives. So 5 steps from the idea to iTunes, super easy. I'm going to blow through this real fast, guys, because I'm running out of time, but I want to make sure that you get this. So step number 1, make sure you're solving a problem for your guests. What is the ambition of your audience? What is their problem? Okay, so what is it that they really want? And what is it that they're struggling with? And how can you be that bridge to that gap? So for example, I mentioned earlier, my audience are brilliant people who are out there and making positive impact in the world, but They are the best kept secret. Okay, so they need to get some visibility. And how we're going to help them solve that problem is we're going to offer them to help them get a podcast getting started, right? Step number two, positioning yourself as an expert. So this is one of the great things that really figure out where in your marketplace you want to be. You don't just want to be the health coach. You want to be like the health coach that specializes in gut health, or you want to be the health coach that specializes in postpartum weight loss, or you want to be the health coach that specializes in natural cures for cancer. So whatever it is that you want to specialize, be that expert and take your stake in that ground. And content repurposing. This is my favorite topic. So make sure that you're getting that content. This is how we're podcasting the smart way. So repurpose your content. Think about all the things that your clients need to know about you before they work with you. Those are the first things that should go in your first 12 episodes. What are your main keywords in your business? Those need to be each have their own topic, and they each need to have their own show. Okay, so those are really important things. And then repurpose the heck out of it. Just because you publish a show once doesn't mean you can't bring it back up again and reshare it with your guests 3 months later. Get them to share it with their audience again. Keep leveraging that relationship. Step number 4, don't just press record and start talking. Have a plan. There's lots of strategy that goes into podcasting. Do some research. Who are the other people in your space that are talking about the same things? Look and see what their most popular episodes are. Don't reinvent the wheel. Make a plan, be strategic about what you want to do, and make sure that you follow the plan. So if you really want to launch your show and get really high up in the rankings, then you need to have a plan for that. You need to have a launch strategy. You need to have a team helping you. You need to let your friends and family know what you're doing so they can help you, right? So don't just press record and submit to iTunes. There's a little bit more planning and strategy that goes in to make your show super successful and a return on your investment. Number 5, make sure that you have your products and services set up. So I highly, highly, highly recommend our clients do not press submit to iTunes on their show until they have a funnel set up that will have a lead capture to a free offer. That's the minimum. So you need to have somewhere to send people, whether that's to a Facebook group or it's to a boot camp that you're doing. Whatever it is that you're doing, you need to have something for them to do when you send them, because you're going to be having people eyeballs on you. They want to their earbuds are going to be on you. They're going to want to work with you moving forward. So what your listeners are listening in, it's like they're listening into your conversation. They're like, oh, I like this person, I want to work with them, I want to join in the conversation. That's the next move from a listener to working with you, is how can they join in the conversation. So you need to be able to offer them, join our membership site, join our Facebook group, download this PDF, watch this video, like whatever you want them to do. Make sure they're coming back to you. And you have that set up before you go. All right, so Ryan's got 100, almost 100,000, it's over that by now, 170,000 downloads, sold out coaching program, and a wait list, all thanks to his podcast. I mean, he's a perfect example of a long-term strategy. So he's at about 2 years in, and he's got people now that are like, Ryan, I've listened to you for 2 years, and now I'm ready to invest in your high-level coaching program, right? It's not just a couple $100 a month program. So it takes people a while to work up to that, right? So pretty amazing. Emily had in May last year 10 discovery calls from her podcast. So for her, podcasting was like this immediate return on her investment, because she spoke to like herself 5 years ago who was struggling with struggling with anxiety. And she was speaking to that woman. And so she knew how to speak to that one person. She has a brilliant at speaking one person on her show. And then so naturally her audience is like, oh, she gets me, I want to work with her. So that's how she's able to start booking calls, and she regularly books several calls a month, and that's how she's been building her coaching program as well. And so for you guys, if you want to go check out mypodcastcoach.com, if you're not sure if you want to be a host or a guest, then this is the perfect thing for you to do. So go over and check it out. mypodcastcoach.com. You can take a quiz, find out if you're meant to be a host or a guest, and reach out. Next class starts April 1st for our group program. We're always doing one-on-one. If you need some help, support, I'm here for you. Thanks so much for being with us today. I super enjoyed our time together, and I'm really excited to hear from you. So reach out, direct message me, LinkedIn, Facebook, uh, Instagram. Check out our podcast. Wherever you are, come and find me, and I'd love to connect. So thanks again for having me, guys. Take care. Have a good night.